4020 Newscast.
Hello and welcome to another 4020 Newscast. It is Thursday the 18th of June. We're here to discuss some of the week's top stories. I'm Tom Coates. I'm here with Tom Alderson. We're the co-founders of 4020 News. We will start with the news breaking overnight in Australia that James Graham could be set for a return to St Helens. Now, Graham's come in for some criticism in recent weeks from pundits in the NRL, with Steve Roach claiming that his legs have gone. Tom, what do you think to the news that James Graham could be coming back to Super League? And do you think he can still do a job at the top level for St Helens?
Yeah, it's a very interesting story to break and very sort of unusual way that it came about in the early hours of the morning. The Dragons, St George Dragons, of course, the club he currently plays for in the NRL, released a bit of an unusual statement, really, just a very small couple of paragraphs just explaining purely about the status of James Graham, that they were in discussions about securing an immediate release for him to return to the UK. Sort of accelerated a little bit. I think there has been discussions in Australia that this could perhaps have been his last year in the NRL. And James himself, I think I remember last month speaking on the Sky Sports podcast, had sort of refused to completely close the door on a return to Super League and St Helens when asked. Whether he'll return to Saints, you would have thought that would probably be the club he will go for. The natural fit, where he came through the grade, where he made his name as a player. And me personally, I still think that he would do a good job, especially at Super League level. I think, some of Steve Roach's comments there is perhaps something to it. He's probably not as quick and as dynamic as he was when he first came to the NRL, but this is his 9th season in Australia. He's 34 years old, so you can understand elements of that. No, but nobody stays in their prime forever. But I still don't think I've seen a more competitive and committed player than James Graham in my time watching the game, and I still think that fire burns and that competitive nature burns. And he's still as tough as they come and still fit as well. I still think that he could punch out some good minutes, especially at Super League level. I think he'd still be a good handy pickup for Saints or indeed any other club that he may come back to.
Definitely, and I think we've seen in recent years that retirement age, that so-called retirement age, being pushed onwards and onwards, and we see players going right into their late 30s. So yeah, I think you mentioned that competitive spirit that Graham has, and I think that does count for a lot. Next up, we have the news of Ben Currie. This was a news item delivered to us by our reporter, John Davidson. The news being that he has been strongly linked with a move to Leeds with one other club interested, although we understand that there is a deal on the table for him at Warrington. Do you think it'd be a good move for Ben Currie to leave Warrington, and do you think it'd be a good capture for Leeds?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I personally think he's a very good player. He burst onto the scene 2012. He's very good England international, and then he's been struck by a quite frankly wretched injury list in the last couple of years, which thankfully he seems to be out the other side on now, and he's managed to string some games together and build a bit of momentum. I think he's a very good player, very strong. Left edge back rower, quick, agile, good hands. I think he's very dangerous for Warrington, which is, I think, why you've seen that Warrington are obviously keen to keep him. I would imagine that the sort of point of conjecture is whether Ben Currie's happy with the offer that Warrington have made and, in fact, staying at the club. But I would have thought that his immediate loyalties would probably lie with Warrington, but if Leeds come in for him and he does choose to go to Leeds, perhaps, or the other club that may be interested, I certainly think it'd be a very good pickup. I think he'd fit very nicely with Leeds, play potentially inside Conrad Hurrell and Nash Hanley, so that would make up a very strong left edge.
Definitely. The second transfer scoop we brought you on 4020 News this week, and again, it's with thanks to John Davidson. Matty Costello potentially leaving St Helens for Salford. Now, unlike Currie, Costello is somebody who's very much found himself on the periphery of selection at Saints. He has played in some big games for them, but he has also spent time away on loan. Would this be a good move for Costello to move under Ian Watson at Salford?
Yeah, I think so. From what I've seen in his limited appearances, Costello looks like a tidy young player. Saints tend to produce, high quality youngsters, and like you say, has found himself more often than not on the outside looking in. It's not an easy task breaking into that St Helens 17. They are the reigning champions when they're full strength. They're probably the best side in the competition on paper. I think he's probably reached the age now. He's a few years into his senior career where he's probably looking for a bit more game time. And he obviously thinks that he could potentially get that at Salford. I think having seen what Salford achieved and what Ian Watson's managed to build with a very limited playing budget and limited resources at Salford, there's obviously some strong appeal now pulling players towards Salford, which is, you could maybe say in recent seasons hasn't been the case. So, something like that to get regular minutes, I certainly think he could add something to Salford. And players who've gone there and played under Ian Watson for a period of time have tended to really flourish and improve as players. So I think that could be a good move all round potentially if St Helens are keen to let him go.
Definitely, and we understand that Chris Wellham could be on his way out of the AJ Bell Stadium, so that would very much be a like-for-like swap from Ian Watson's perspective. And as you say, that track record that the Red Devils have of developing players should be exciting for Costello as well. Next up, we have a man we discussed in more detail last week, and that's Luke Thompson, who's now landed in the NRL. Do you think we will see the best of Luke Thompson straight away? Will he make an immediate impact, or will we have to wait a couple of weeks or even a couple of months before we see him do what he can do?
I mean, your initial reaction would probably be to say that you'd probably be waiting a few weeks for him to hit his strap and find his feet. He's in a new competition. Not forgetting that Luke Thompson hasn't played since the middle of March, whereas the NRL clubs, by the time he finishes his 2 week quarantine period, will have been back for 4 or 5 weeks. So he will inevitably be behind the eight ball in that sense. Having said that, seeing the quality of Luke Thompson and the drive and commitment and the tenacity that he reportedly trains with, and he's one of the fittest at St Helens, one of the quickest in all of the drills. I certainly think physically he can get himself up to speed very quickly. He's one of the best. There's no doubt about it. He's one of the best forwards in the Super League. He's one of the best English forwards in the game. So I certainly think that he can hit his stride quicker than some people may say. I certainly think that he will definitely have a huge impact at the Bulldogs once he finds his feet. We're going to have to wait and see. He'll have to fit into the structures of a new competition. But I think the new rules and the speed of the game for an agile front rower like Thompson, who plays long minutes, I think that could really suit him, and he could end up having an immediate impact with Canterbury.
Let's hope so, for the sake of the England team and, for the sake of flying the Super League flag, if you like, over there. Another Thompson on our radar this week, Joel Thompson, the Manly player. Heavy speculation in Australia that's carried over into the UK that we could see him revealed as a St Helens player. What can Super League fans and what can St Helens expect from Joel Thompson if he does make the move?
Yeah, well, he'll bring plenty of experience. He's played in the NRL for a number of years now with Canberra, St George, and most recently Manly, who we understand obviously has just been released by the Sea Eagles. He's a very committed, wholehearted player. He plays long minutes. You know what you're going to get. He's probably not one of those players that makes the front page of the papers for outstanding players. Like your Jason Taumalolos, your David Fafitas at Brisbane. He doesn't bust the line at will and score big tries, but he does those, little one percenters and very fine detail plays that the players within the playing group respect the most. He makes, countless tackles a game. He does all of the tough stuff. And he plays, long minutes, as I say, and he's very, very consistent. You know what you're going to get from him week in, week out. And he's obviously got longevity in the game. He's played nearly 10 years in the NRL. He's played a lot of games. And I certainly think it could be a big inclusion for St Helens. It's an interesting one with the development about James Graham. Obviously, everybody's immediately jumping to the fact that he'll be going back to St Helens. You would imagine that's could be a potential like-for-like swap with Luke Thompson if that's to happen immediately. It'll be interesting to see how St Helens are planning to bring Joel Thompson in if this is to go ahead, bearing in mind that he will count as an overseas player. So I'm not entirely sure what the situation is with St Helens, whether they'll have to move an overseas player out to accommodate him. I'm not sure, but he's been a very consistent performer. He's an Indigenous All-Star. He does a lot of work in the community game in Australia. Is very highly respected and very well thought of on and off the field. So that could only be a good inclusion for Saints and Super League.
Yeah, so potentially another good addition to our competition, but as you mentioned, perhaps not as straightforward a transaction as they may once have hoped. The final player on the move this week, the big story, Morgan Escare is released from Wigan, perhaps not coming as a big surprise to many. It was an amicable parting of ways by all accounts. Morgan taking to Twitter to thank the club and in particular Sean Wayne for his work, and Chris Radlinski issuing his own statement wishing Morgan all the best. How do you rate Morgan, and do you think we will see him with another Super League club? I know he's spent time with Wakefield previously. Where do you think we'll see him end up?
Yeah, I think Morgan Escare has just been, an unfortunate victim of the situation at Wigan. He's a very good player. There's no doubt about it. A very good attacking player, and he's really made the most for the most part of his time at Wigan. He came from Catalan probably in a little bit of a lull. Reignited his career at Wigan. He won the Super League. He won a World Club Challenge. He's reached the very top of the game there, and for a period was Wigan's first choice fullback. Obviously, Adrian Lamb's seen something in Zach Hardacre and most recently Bevan French to keep playing them ahead of Escare. And Escare's really struggled for game time. As you say, he spent time on loan at Wakefield last year. So his release really doesn't come as much of a surprise. He's obviously looking to explore options where he can get some more solid game time. He obviously believes, and I think nobody will argue that he can still contribute a lot at Super League level. There has been rumours that he may end up at Salford. It'll be interesting. We'll have to wait and see. I personally can't see him going back to Wakefield. I think Wakefield are in a different position to where they were when he came along. They were ravaged by injuries. They needed players in the team. He did a very good job while he was at Wakefield, but they've signed Alex Walker from London. They've got Ryan Hampshire, and he'll predominantly want to play fullback, I imagine. The interesting one about Salford is that Niall Evalds has obviously signed to go to Castleford for 2021, and as we've seen in recent weeks, there's players starting with the game still being suspended. There's player movement being accelerated a little bit. There's murmurs in the media that this could accelerate Evalds going to Castleford. Obviously, Jordan Rankin has just left with immediate effect to go back home in the midst of the coronavirus, and he won't be coming back. So there's a spot immediately open at the Jungle there. I wouldn't be surprised if we see potentially Evalds securing a release from Salford to go to Castleford, and then therefore that would make the optimum fullback spot for Morgan Escare to slot in at Salford. So it could potentially see all parties win there, but I don't know any more than that. That's pure speculation. We are putting two and two together there, but it'll certainly be interesting to see how that all plays out.
Definitely, certainly a player with the calibre to remain in Super League and a very exciting player to watch. Just last of all, we're very Super League and NRL orientated on this episode, but it'd be remiss of us not to congratulate Rochdale Hornets on their takeover going through. We had confirmation of this on Tuesday, and they've now returned to being a company in the traditional sense of the word, from being a supporter-led organisation, a cooperative. The new chairman, Andy Maisie, certainly has some big plans for the club, and I'm sure the whole sport will be keeping an eye on their progress. But that's it for another 4020 newscast. James Graham could be on his way back to Super League. Ben Currie linked with Leeds. Matty Costello linked with Salford. Luke Thompson touching down in Australia. But Joel Thompson could be on his way to Saints, while Morgan Escare has been released by Wigan. And as we mentioned there, it's also the week that Andy Maisie becomes the chairman of Rochdale. Thank you for listening to the 4020 newscast. Follow the link above to join the 4020 fans Facebook group and let us know your views. And remember, for the latest news and magazine content added daily, visit 4020.news.
4020 Newscast.